next section, which is why speeches flop, or we like to say 6 danger traps to avoid and conquer. So again, this is another section, much like the L factor or the adjusting to a venue and a certain situation that we share on the second day of boot camp, and we're just covering them kind of from a high level here. So why speeches flop, 6 traps to avoid and conquer. It's really a danger zone, right? Because in order to help better connect with audiences, to book more gigs and bolster a reputation, you want to be sure to avoid these six liabilities that really can serve as a proverbial nails in the coffin of a speaker career. Number 1 is the data dump. You always want to leave your audience wanting more and not less. It's of course not your job to submerge the audience in a deluge of information on a given topic. It's definitely not a college lecture. Rather, it's to cherry pick the most useful items that benefit them in their daily lives. Too much data simply overwhelms people, of course, and will be ignored. Number 2 is no consistent through line. You see this a lot. Consistency is key. If you jump from theme to theme throughout your keynote, your audience is going to be confused, and eventually you'll lose interest. So instead of patching together a bunch of incongruent topics, make sure there's a primary focus to captivate your audience attention and emotional investment. If you're to poll the audience after leaving the keynote, each member of your speech should recite the singular crux of your speech. And this concept of a through line is something you see. You talk to people who perform on Broadway, in plays and musicals. You hear about it in writing novels, television, and movies. But just having that constant through line, that constant message that carries through from the beginning of the talk through the end, really ties everything together and holds that audience's focus. Number 3 is not having clear next steps. So delivering a brilliant, stunning, inspiring speech, but also ensuring that the gift to the audience with next steps to deploy the methodologies covered in your time together is so crucial. If you've brought your audience to laughter and tears with no definitive action items, the emotional journey you've taken them on has been for naught. Giving them tools to help bring them into your thoughts and your world can really help enact positive change. Remember, the best keynotes are kind of this kind of intersection between, on one side, being actionable and on the other side, being impactful, and being inspirational rather, and being impactful. So injecting the audience with energy, but then making sure they feel good, but not leaving them with anything to do, works great for a day or two. But the idea here is that they're making different choices, not just in the hours and days, but in the weeks and months and even years that follow speech. Some of the best phone calls that we get is someone who heard a speech that we gave 3 years ago and talks about all the things that they now do differently as a leader, as an organization, as a board, and as a team, as a result of hearing a conversation or a message that we delivered. That's where the real juice is in a quality speech, and that ultimately drives bookings for months and years, not just in that quick moment. Number 4 is having a single modality. So variety, of course, is the spice of life, and also the stuff of legendary keynotes. Adhering to one type of story or reference frame for the entirety of your keynote is as effective as lying on stage and taking a nap. So switch it up. Incorporate videos adjacent to personal stories. Reference examples from across different hemispheres and industries. And the more you keep the audience guessing, the more engaged they will be. We like to use stories that come from large organizations and medium-sized organizations and small organizations. We like to talk about things that are local to the city. So I'm talking to an audience that Chef hooked us up with in St. Louis. We'll use a St. Louis example. Then we'll use an example from the United States. Then we'll use an example from other parts of the world. We might share information via video. We might share it via an audio track. We might share it visually via some cool infographic or graphic that we walk people through. Another time might just be the spoken word. So mixing those things up and kind of jumping around adds that variety, adds that spice that makes a keynote more impactful and really stands out, as opposed to just doing one single modality and only doing one thing or one kind of example. Number 5 is losing the audience. And when we say lose the audience, we mean really alienate the audience. The worst way to lose an audience is by sharing a personal conviction of yours that doesn't align with the audience's worldview. Another terrible way is to cite a blatantly false fact that defies logic or can be easily disproven with a Wikipedia scan. It's easy enough to avoid losing the audience, so exercise common sense and avoid divisive rhetoric, inappropriate language, and obvious falsehoods. The problem is if we take a leap of faith and we state something that just sounds like it supports the narrative but isn't actually factually correct, and that audience knows it or they can quickly see it, then it doesn't matter that the other 99 things you said were great and on target. They're going to take everything you said and kind of discredit it because that one fact they knew to be not true or mostly not true. Number 6, losing the, whoops. Oh, that one's a duplicate. Number 5. Okay. So there you have it. It is the 5 danger traps to avoid and conquer as to why speeches flop and the things that you really want to look out for to stay away from and make sure that they're not really causing headache and causing you ultimately to have less positive response, have lower ratings, and be booked less. Any thoughts or feedback on that? Any suggestions of things that we should stay away from to avoid a flop when we're on stage? Shep or Steve, I know you guys are on stage quite a bit. I'm curious if you have anything that's worth mentioning or share. There he is.
Sure. Yeah. I was trying to go off mute here because trying to set the prime example, mute until it's time to talk. People ask me, what are the 3 things it takes to be successful? And really, if you don't do these three things, I think you risk failing on stage. And number 1 is to know your content. And that's just preparation. Number 2 is you need to understand your audience. You already addressed if you can drop 3 things in to personalize it, that's great. But I think it's more than just personalization. It's truly understanding who that audience is. I actually had a terrible experience where one of my trainers didn't read the audience before she went and did a presentation well, didn't prepare properly, did a great speech, but it totally missed the mark. Client calls me back, said the ratings were terrible, and we ended up, giving them back their money. You just have to know the audience. And the third thing you have to know is yourself. A definite recipe for failure. If you know you need 8 hours of sleep for a good night's sleep, and you choose to stay up and go out with the client or go out with friends the night before and only get 4.5 hours sleep, you're setting yourself up for
Totally. Shep, are there certain questions that you always ask on a kickoff call or kind of a prep call to make sure you really understand the audience and don't show up with a surprise?
Yeah, obviously we want to understand who the audience is, so who's sitting in the audience. Tell me their titles. Tell me the speakers you've had in the past. If I know who that speaker is or a couple of them, I may call and say, can you give me some insight? I want to learn terminology, so I ask about terminology. If I hear a client refer to their employees as associates and I start talking about team members, I'm disconnecting. Okay. If they call their customers guests instead of customers, I was at Menards the other day and I heard them refer to me as a guest in their hardware store. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So if I ever did a Menards program, I would not do a customer service program. It would be a guest service program. But here are 2, what I call the magic. There's the magic question, but the setup is, what are the 3 things you absolutely want this audience to walk away with? So that's customization. But this extra question is, if we were to get together a year from now, what would have to have happened for you to feel that this was the best investment in any speaker you've ever hired? What would have to happen? Is there something that happens afterwards? There's a million things they could say. That actually is a modification of Dan Sullivan's relationship question. And it's really about, letting the customer define what success of the program is.
Very good. Yeah, one of the questions that I know we like to ask is kind of similar. So we'll say, when we walk off stage, we're going to probably ask you on a scale from 1 to 10, how was that? And if you're going to say an 11, what does an 11 sound like and feel like and taste like? Yeah.
That's
and
a
share
great
that
question.
with us. And then when you walk off stage, a lot of times, because you go ahead and deliver that, they're like, that was an 11. That's exactly what we wanted.
That's a great setup. I love that. Yeah.
It's good.
By the way, that's in one of these calls. So I actually have notes from that particular call and wrote that down. And I've asked the question and then somehow get off asking the question, but I'm going back to asking that question. So thanks for sharing.
Nice. Of course.
Again.
Steve, any thoughts on your end of things that you do to help customize or really ensure that you're exactly targeted for the group that you're speaking to?
Yeah, so I think we're obviously in the innovation space, which is Josh's wheelhouse. And so before the event, Yes, I want to know all the things you talked about, but I also want to know, because I look at innovation through the lens of not ideas, but from solving problems. I want to know what are the challenges, the issues, the problems that they have as a company, as an industry, as a culture. And I use those and I refer to those throughout the speech so that when I'm talking about, what kinds of problems do we need to solve, I can then bring forward the actual language that they gave me. And that's, to me, just a simple way to customize things. I want to build on something that Shep said, though, which I think is pretty interesting, which is I look at the speech as much as I can, not as the end, but rather the start. And so I'm always looking for what can I do to keep the conversation going. And part of it is I always include, like when I leave the stage, everybody will get all of my slides. I always do that through the meeting planners because I don't want the meeting planner to feel like I'm circumventing their relationship.
Sure.
So I will send them the slides, and at the end of the slides are a couple of tools that I will talk briefly about that people can use. And then I think, as you know, one of the other products that I offer is my 30-day innovation challenge, which is a mobile game where people are actually able to compete against others in the audience for the next 30 days. And so what it does is it keeps the conversation going, so that when people leave the event, they still have sort of that reinforcing mechanism, and it takes less than 2 minutes a day.
That's great.
So I call that the after experience, and we actually talk specifically about what our after experience is. And I try to emphasize to the client that, hey, many people, when they're hiring a speaker, they're concerned with that whatever number of minutes on stage are about, the 60 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is. And I tell them, I'm going to deliver just like any other speaker would, the best speech I could possibly do. But really, that is just part of it. And to your point, Stephen, I don't necessarily refer to it as the beginning, but I say, let's talk about the other value that I can bring to your program. I'm a content creator. I mean, I don't know. I do a lot. I don't know if I call myself a content creator on steroids, but 2-3 articles every single week, videos every single week for years. And I tell them there are a dozen videos that they can pull up and they could start streaming to their people 6 months before I get there. They can use these videos as follow-up. Something that I'm willing to do that I think is a huge differentiator, and here's some of the secret sauce that puts me apart and separates me from my other speakers in this world. Many times today, that client has a video camera, and their video camera primarily for archival purposes, but once in a while they ask, can we use it for people that weren't there? And that's perfectly fine. And I say, look, when we're done, just shortly after, 10, 15 minutes after the audience clears out, why don't you bring that videographer over? Let me do 5, 6 quick 1 to 2 minute tips, one right after the other. I do this all the time. I knock them out in 15, 20 minutes. And by the way, you can use these once a month, or if it's a franchise group, send them to your franchisees so that they can share with their team. And they absolutely love this. It takes virtually no time, costs me no money, and it's a huge value add.
That is great. That is
I love that.
Yeah. Anything like that. I mean, think about it. Just there, you're already there. You already done all this work. That stuff cold. Like, it adds so much value to the audience and to the client. Really separates you. Makes such a difference. You're easy to work with. Like, all these things just check so many great boxes. And like, the ROI on that little bit of investment of time is, you're there anyways. Probably would be doing something else. So
right. Yeah. I'd be getting ready to go to the airport.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Good. Any tips from anybody else, or any thoughts or questions on either of these topics? Good. Or any other questions on anything in general? Any cool wins lately to celebrate? Things to share that have gone that have gone well? Business good for everybody?
Hi, Jordan. This is John Levisay.
Hey, John.
I have a question. I've been using what I learned about offering the 30-day and the 90-day follow-up to Josh does. And the people seem to really love that as a differentiator. And some of the clients aren't as excited about the 90-day. And I've done the 30 days, and by the time I say, well, let's schedule the 90-day, and I know Josh assigns a homework at the 30-day to be completed at the 90-day. Do you have any other insights or updates on how he's using that, or any other tips to make that really have value?
Yeah, I think sure, absolutely. So part of it kind of depends from our experience on the audience and the expectations that have been set, and kind of the communication between then and later. So for a conversation that's a few weeks out or 30 days, like you probably found, it's kind of easy. But 90 days later, like if it's a large audience and there hasn't been any dialogue in between then, sometimes that can fade away and they just have moved on so much. So a couple of thoughts. One is the 90-day conversation works better if it's like sometimes a smaller, more intimate group. So if you're working with a board or a group of 40 or 50 people and you kind of had that ability to walk around the room and build that kind of in-person direct one-on-one connection, then 90 days later, they're still kind of more engaged in that personal way because they just think of you differently than if you're standing in front of 5,000 people or even a group of 500 people. The other thing is if you're going to do something 90 days out, kind of engaging in a dialogue with them in between then. So having something that goes to them via email, if there's 12 or 13 weeks, there's a weekly tip or a weekly newsletter, a weekly update that goes out, a weekly video clip. And it doesn't even necessarily always have to be specific for them. It can be the same content that you use for many different clients. So they're used to seeing with you. They're used to interacting with you. You've encouraged them to reach out, send an email, post something on Facebook if they want a reaction or chat with you about a certain topic. And then we found that when we do those sorts of things, 90 days later, that audience is there and they're more ready to engage. But again, I think it depends a lot too on who you're working with and the size of it and kind of their culture and the impact that you made to find out that 90 days is really is going to be impactful or is going to be less so.
That's really helpful, especially a weekly tip between the 30-day and the 90-day to keep the engagement. Thanks.
Yeah, because they tend to, people get busy and they forget, and so just staying top of mind. Good. What else, Ryan?
What's up, everybody? Hey, so sorry to join a little late.
No problem.
I've had some successes lately of people searching on Google and finding me, which is cool. So I say, how'd you find me?
That's awesome.
And, one person said dynamic speaker. They ended up seeing a tweet, led to my website, then led to a TED Talk, led to it. The other one was how to book a speaker, ended up on Speaker Hub, and then track. So I've been so focused on an official funnel, and it was nice to have this Google funnel. So just being top of mind. So that was a win. But 2 of those deals I lost. I made it to the final 2. Mm-hmm. I lost one on pricing, and then I lost one on a survey from the employees of what the topic is that they wanted. And in sort of the I guess homage to this book that I wrote, which is called Ditch the Act, we really talk about the value of sharing when things don't go right. Mm-hmm. So it took a lot to do, but I tweeted out and shared that I'd lost both these deals. And the response was amazing. And that was just kind of an interesting concept, right? Because again, this idea that we think it's all about, we land all these deals, we make all this money. But it really felt good to just say, look, I made it to the top 2. I'm pissed, I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, but it didn't work. And the support of my community came out, and it just made me feel like, cool, it doesn't matter that I lost that. And then as a result, it's probably not related, but got another inbound request and just talked with him this morning, feel real good about it. And I even shared with him a concept of the keynote of ditching the act, just sharing what doesn't go well. And I shared with him that I just lost my last 2 deals. And he was like, it was cool. So I feel like that transparency is helping me feel just way more comfortable in my shoes where I'm at right now. And it's just like I feel the stress and the pressure off, because there's so much pressure to make it seem like you get every deal and that you're super in high demand. So I feel good. So those failures and sharing them, I feel like they're a bit of a success with it. So yeah, that's all.
That's awesome. Yeah, the transparency. I mean, it's certainly kind of, I'm sure, as you know, it opens you up and seems more approachable, and you automatically have a client or a meeting planner, whoever it is, that likes you. You have that high likability instantly. On the fee thing, one thing that we've been experimenting with recently is kind of leaving. It's tricky because in a direct deal, you want to if you think you might be open to a negotiation, you want to make sure that window's there. But at the same time, you don't want someone negotiating against you for no reason when they have a full fee. So something I've been playing around with when it's direct is if I have a sense that the fee could be potentially an issue, I will say something like, as they're trying to look at it, say, hey, I don't know exactly where you're at budget wise, but if you kind of agree with us that you think that Josh or whoever the speaker is the right fit, but you just can't get there from a budget perspective, it's it's always worth us having a conversation, because while a lot of times we can't always lower the price. Sometimes, Josh might already be in a nearby city or have a reason to be there. There might be some other way to collaborate that it makes sense. And so don't ever worry about offending us. But if you figure out what the budget is and kind of where it needs to be, let's talk through it, because perhaps that we can get creative and figure out a way to solve that problem. Perhaps I can make another recommendation to someone. So I try and tease that out if I kind of have in the back of my mind that price could potentially be a concern. Of course, balancing it, like I said, with not letting them negotiate when I know they got way more than enough budget to afford what it is that we have to offer.
Right. No, that's helpful.
It's good. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or cool wins or losses or experiences or questions that anyone's been through recently?
This is Krister. I had something
Hey,
I think is starting to work out as a win. When I was at the last three-ring circus in March, I approached a couple speakers bureaus with the thought. So I'm a new speaker and I haven't really taken the step to hiring a salesperson yet. But I approached a couple speakers with the thought that I would take the inbound leads that I'm generating and pass them to them, for them to close. Partly because of what I was finding is I was getting shortlisted and I was not closing deals when I was doing it myself. But the real intention with that was to, and obviously I'm paying speaker bureau commissions on deals that could have been direct, but the intention was to open a relationship with a bureau. And the net of it is they've actually proposed me for more events that I didn't generate than I've actually, really high quality leads that I've actually passed them. So, I think I've gotten at this point, I've gotten one booking from a lead that I generated and one booking from a lead that they basically put me in, and they've actually proposed me for, it looks like 4 or 5 other potential gigs that were not actually leads that I generated. So for a speaker who has very little track record, I guess, since everybody says that's hard to get bureaus to talk to us.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Seems like a win so far. Still early days, but that's what I got.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good thing to share. Early on in this business, I remember finally getting on a call with a guy. Happy to share his name. His name is, it's good wisdom. His name is Seth Deckman, works at the speaker agency, where they're really based out of San Diego. I think he's in Argentina, but anyways, I was talking to him about Josh and about someone else, and he kind of gave me this, start scolding me. And he's like, look, I appreciate all that. He goes, but you know what I need? He goes, it's not another speaker. What I need is another client. And so, seems kind of obvious, right? But to me, I was like, whoa, what do you mean? I was like, totally I hadn't thought through it that way. And so anytime with a bureau that you're able to do something like that, like just give them the leads that didn't fit for you, or, you can't do because you can't do that date, or the budget doesn't make sense, or even, one of the coolest things you can do, of course, there's a real dollar cost to it, but you close something yourself, you call up that bureau that you wanted to get in with and you haven't been able to, or that rep that won't, kind of return your phone call or doesn't seem to really click with you, and say, hey, I just closed this deal. I'd like to run it through you. And of course you can take your commission. If you're able to and are willing to make that kind of investment, we've found that with a pretty high probability of, certainly they're going to call you back real quick after not returning any of your phone calls. They'll call you instantly. But that there's a much greater probability that they're going to work with you, that they're going to pitch you, that they're going to talk to you about clients. So that's another solid option if you're looking to really kick something off with a bureau and try and get their attention, to be that top group of speakers that's always in their consideration set. One other thing to share on that, there's nothing beats kind of an in-person conversation. And so we, on a couple times a year, make sure that we venture out and are interacting with speaker bureaus in person. So there's some that you'll run into when you may give a speech, or they come by to see you speak in a certain city. But sometimes it's good just to swing by and have coffee with someone, lunch with someone else, bring in lunch for an entire team. And so just this week we did it. Josh and I went to New York, and then we went to Boston. So we traveled out on Sunday night. We spent the entire day in New York and met with a bunch of bureaus, both in a full team setting and then just a couple times one-on-one. We headed over to New Jersey for a late in the day meeting. Then we headed up to Boston. We had a meeting in the morning. We did a big big lunch over at American Program Bureau in Boston. And literally as a result of that, like I can count on two hands the number of opportunities we got this week that I'm highly confident we wouldn't have gotten. Not because we weren't qualified, not because they didn't like us, none of those things. It was just, we're just top of mind. We were just there. We just had coffee or had a drink with someone, and they're thinking about it. And a couple of those are very likely to close. After this, we're filming a video for one of them. So those kind of little things, that investment of a few $100 an airplane ticket, night in a hotel, kind of taking your time and going around a city, nothing beats the power of a handshake and an in-person relationship, no matter how many times you met the person in the past. So another thing that tends to work in the bureau front. Good. Anything else anyone wants to share? Any questions? Any other wins or losses that like to share with everybody here? All right. Well, it's great to see everybody. As always, this will be out on YouTube, and you can share it with others and take a look. Shep, were you about to say something? Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks, and just waving goodbye.
Bye, Shep. It's good to see everybody. This one was a little bit more than a month. We got them a little bit farther apart, but we're going to get them back together coming up on a regular monthly basis, and hopefully get to see some of you coming up at NSA in a few weeks or back at boot camp this fall, and have a wonderful, great weekend. Take care.
Thanks.